to keep this pretty informal. That's the primary purpose of this today, is to keep an informal conversation built around nutrition, specifically a lot of the questions that I get from everyone. Um, right now, everyone's kind of asked, or not everyone, but in general, we got a lot of the same questions and a lot of the same concerns in general in relating to nutrition. So the purpose of it is to basically kind of go over those as a whole, and make sure that we are kind of dialed in as a group, and just anybody who needs help in general. So really, this is to keep it simple. I'm not going to go too detailed into all these different things. I'm going to talk about a few different purposes, what I would call are pillars, principles of nutrition, things that are really, really vital for anything, whether it's and again, it depends on the success of what you're looking to do. It could be your goal, it could be physique, nutrition, or I'm sorry, physique, health, wellness, just anything in that category. So we're going to kind of touch on all of it. I'll keep it really simple. Like I said, it's practical, and it's very casual. All right. So I'll go over our principles, how it's going to go. I'll go over the principles of nutrition, talk briefly about them. I'm going to spend more time answering the questions that everyone submitted. After I go through those, I will leave it open to, I'll look at the chat at that point. So if anybody has a question from anything that I'm saying, you're more than welcome to enter it into the chat. The goal of this is actually to get everyone to critically think. Well, another goal of it is to get everybody to critically think about nutrition and a little bit different too, thinking about the practical accountability side of things. And then hopefully this spawns into more interest, because I realize that if you're not really kind of interested in nutrition, you're not thinking about it, it's going to be hard to have results. So we want to make sure that we kind of create that environment more. And so, again, that is a big part of it and what we're doing. All right, so we'll go into it. The first principle of nutrition is protein. All right, now one of the biggest misconceptions is, and actually we often undervalue protein. Our whole body is protein. That really is actually what turns on our genes. We often think about it as DNA, but it's not as much as you think. So protein is key. Protein is king. It's number one. You absolutely have to have it, and it's often neglected. People think they get enough protein, but they don't realize they really don't. It's something that people go, I eat about 60, 80 grams. That's not even close to enough. So the simplest way I used to calculate it would be by kilograms. And I'd start getting into the 1.8 per pound or per kilogram of body weight. And it's too confusing, particularly when you think about us being in America right now. So you use pounds. And it really honestly kept coming back to around the same ratio. And that standard is 1 to 1. So it's really simple when you think about how much do I weigh. So if you weigh 180 pounds, you should have 180 grams of protein per day. That should be your target. Now, I understand that a lot of people will look at that and think, oh my goodness, that's insane. That's a lot. That's so many calories. It's not. 1 gram of protein is 4 calories. That's literally all it is. So when you think about it like that, you're not getting that many calories in. However, I realize and recognize that when you get a protein, it's usually going to have some fat in it or something else. So that will add some additional calories. However, that 1 to 1 ratio will allow you to actually have protein synthesis within the body, so that you're actually going to put yourself in an environment of growth. Without that environment, you're simply not going to grow, right? And so when we think about what we're trying to do here from the body's perspective, it's really simple. We're trying to move forward. So you're either in a state of growth or you're in a state of breakdown. There's no neutral, there's no idle. We want to make sure that we, again, focus on being in a state of growth. That doesn't mean that, for some women, they'll look and go, I don't want to get bigger. Well, that's not what it means. When you look at growth, you're talking about lean muscle, and therefore you're going to have a body composition transition, right? So that's what we're trying to do. We want more lean mass, not as much fat mass. So you have to have adequate amount of protein for that. So again, going back to it, it's the 1 to 1 ratio. So simply stated, if you eat 100 grams of protein, 4 calories, that's 400 calories, right? Because 4 per gram. Now you will get some fat, but it's really not as much as you think. So try to work towards that ratio. If you're heavy into lifting for strength training, or physique, trying to gain muscle, you're going to need a little bit more, okay, than that 1 to 1. So I might increase that to 1.2 grams of protein per pound. Okay, so you're going to increase a little bit more. I do not drop it below 1-to-1. So you're gonna go, I want to lose some weight. Cool. Cut calories somewhere else. Don't cut it from the protein category. That is a constant that should remain. Okay. Now, last thing to touch on for that, if you have a hard time, I know some people who are used to eating 60 grams of protein, 40 grams of protein, and they go eating 120. I don't even know where to start. And we'll get into more of that because that's some of the questions. But start smaller. Okay. So if your goal is 150 grams of protein a day, maybe you should start at 100, do that for a week or two, then build to like 120, do that for a week or two, then build one more time to 140, do that for a week or two, and then get to 150. That's more sustainable, and it's also gives you an opportunity to kind of figure out and learn about the process of what you should be doing food wise. So that is the first primary principle of nutrition: protein, protein, protein. Go for one for one. Number two, added sugar. Okay. Sugar is absolutely the worst thing. I understand that sugar plays a role, and people are addicted to it. It's 100% proven. It's a fact. There's a level of addiction that's built around sugar, similar to drugs, right? And that's something that is hard to kick. So that's a challenge. So we'll get into that's a question. So I'll get into that part later. But sugar absolutely is inflammatory. It causes disease. It feeds disease. So it's a good idea to reduce and limit sugar. When you look at studies in kids, and I'll be writing something about this later, they talk about max number added of sugar that they should have in a day would be 50, and that's high. So if you think about a cup of juice, you're pretty much there already. If you have a Gatorade, you're already beyond 50 for kids. So that's where a lot of those links to like what they call ADHD and some of these other inflammatory diseases are coming from. Even now, they're linking Alzheimer's to a lot of sugar, and they've shown that basically it deteriorates. It gets, again, there's an inflammatory. So we want to reduce sugar. So number two on the principle is, if you're going to start a nutrition, once you set your goal, and we'll get into goal setting, but once you set your goal, you need to absolutely start, and I'm going to challenge you on this, is to do a 15-day sugar reduction fast. Okay. So what that means is basically reduce sugar, cut it out of your diet for 15 days. Concentrate on how you feel throughout that process. That is a massive, again, an important role of nutrition. Now, here's the number one reason why. Most of the time people struggle, it's particularly with weight loss, because they become insensitive to insulin. Okay. So what is insulin? Basically, you talk about diabetes. They give themselves type 2 diabetes because you're no longer sensitive to insulin. Okay. I'm not going to go, like I said, I'm going to go full science into all this stuff, but I'll keep it real simple. Basically, insulin has to react to your cell. And what happens is, over time, through eating unhealthy fats like omega-6s, for which would basically be like fried foods, vegetable oils, your cells no longer become responsive. So they do not allow insulin to penetrate the outer wall of the cell. Because it doesn't allow that, it basically creates that type 2 diabetes aspect. Okay. And what happens then is that you basically you're going to struggle no matter what you do to change your diet right away. You're going to have a struggle with weight loss, fat loss. So when you reduce sugar, and then you can add in things like resistance training and all these other aspects, what you'll end up getting is you're starting to kind of shift your body. You want to create an environment where you will become sensitive to insulin again. And so in the simplest way, reducing and basically eliminating sugar and cutting by 15 days is what I call it. Because usually you can go longer, but that's the kind of I found as a good target point. It's attainable. It's not too long, but it's also not too short. So it can be very effective. So they basically just cut added sugar. You try to reduce your fruit as well, but you cut added sugar. So sports drinks are out, obviously. Any sort of soda, I know for you wine connoisseurs, wine is out, beer is out. You start going down the list and you're cutting all this added sugar out. When you have coffee, cut it out. Not coffee, but anything added like sugars and things of that nature. Yes, that goes into the sugar alcohols as well. So your alternatives, and I'll get into that later. So again, go on a 15-day fast anytime you start something for nutrition. And in general, we want to, in a 15-day fast off sugar, and we want to reduce all of our sugar count, no matter how you look at it. That is something that absolutely should be implemented in nutrition. Number 3, eat more, not less. Okay, this is probably the biggest flaw of most people. They think I'm trying to lose weight, so I'm going to starve myself. I'm going to keep my calories down to 1,000. I'm just not going to eat very much. That basically absolutely doesn't work. Okay, you can reduce and go on a calorie restricted diet for, I would even argue, a month. That would be the max limit that I would ever allow somebody to go on, because your body will eventually adapt. What happens with your body is it basically is it's intelligent. So it's going to say, all right, cool, if you only giving me 1,000 calories, well, I'm going to reduce. Really simply, I'm just going to not burn anymore. I'm going to lower my metabolic rate. I'm going to drop down, and I'm going to basically make sure that I can sustain life at 1,000 calories. So it becomes a storage vessel rather than a burning vessel. So everything you're eating, you're going to be storing. And so you're only eating 1 to 2 meals a day, but you're restricting your calories. And that basically is absolutely the worst thing you can do for yourself. So my recommendation is eat more, not less. You want to find, now there's obviously a point there, right? Like if you're not doing very much, you're not going to go eat 5,000 calories. But these are things that, we again want to focus on, and we're going to try to, we will eventually, we're going to try to, eliminate, or work towards. So I would argue that, and this is very individualized. So one part of this for thought is it's a very individualized thing, the calorie gain. And so if you start by following the first 2 rules, which are basically the protein, right? Making sure you have adequate amount of protein. And then if you also go into the not only protein, but reducing the sugar, calories are going to become a little bit less important. And I think that is probably the most advantageous way to eat. But again, eat more, not less. So we'll start getting into some basics. If some guy walks in, he's 200 pounds, I might start him on a 2,000 calorie diet. If we were going to go into the calorie game, I don't like the calorie game, but let's just say I do. I might start them on a 2,000, maybe 2,200 calorie diet. And then we'll figure out from the macro side, I might end up throwing the macros at, well, I don't want to get too far into this, but let's just say the macros, I'm going to throw the 1-to-1 to start with for protein, and then I'll balance everything out from that. Depending on their lifestyle, you have to factor in a lot of different things. So sometimes when you get to these calories, it's going to be super individualized. And that's kind of why it's a hard general rule. But typically 200 pounds, I'll just look at it and go, okay, around 2,000 calories. And then we'll measure from there, and we'll figure out which way we're going. We're either going to go up or down, and it kind of depends. So that's the first part. Okay. The second part of that is, let's say a woman walks in, she's 150 pounds, not very active. We might start around like a 1,600 calorie diet and just kind of adjust from there. So I like to give just baselines. It's not as simple all the time. If somebody walks in, they weigh 300 pounds, they're excessively overweight, I'm not going to be like, oh, you're at 3,000 calories. So we have to kind of play a little bit of individual game at that point. So again, you would have to figure that out with trial and error. But protein would be your primary. So like I said, you want to start at that with that 1-to-1 ratio. But again, eat more, not less. When you start eating 1 to 2 meals a day, it's not good. That's not going to work for you. Number 4, choose whole foods. That's the fourth principle I have for nutrition. If possible, go unwrapped. It's really, when you think, the real food component that plays a primary role. It's typically these foods are less inflammatory. And you don't realize how much destruction inflammatory foods do to your body. And it's literally like making you swell. It becomes very challenging to actually, again, really reach any result, no matter what any goal, no matter what your goal actually is. So choose whole foods as much as possible. Again, real food like would be meat, rather than going and buying some processed packaged good. Protein bars, don't recommend. There's a few out there that I always am I'm always searching. There's, just to find one that has more real food in it, and they're really tough to find with good balances for everyone. So I don't have a ton of recommendations there, but I would highly suggest, as much as possible, choosing and going down the whole food route and not as much of the packaged food. Number 5, I might argue is the most important. I'm not going to get too far into the mentality game, but accountability to your choices is the first and primary. You know, I will put a lot of blame on our overall food environment as a whole. You know, when you think about the FDA, what they approve, you think about all these packaged foods. Why in America can we put in all these red dyes and all these other, you know, yellow number 40 and all these other cancer causing inflammatory ingredients? But when you go to Europe, they just use sugar and they're not allowed to use those ingredients. But for whatever reason in the United States, they are. So we could blame that and go down that route. Now, I do think there is blame for a lot of the disease with that, but again, that is not going to help you in the immediate. You're going to have to be responsible for yourself and you have to take accountability. So my number one tip for accountability is start a journal. You should absolutely be recording your food down if you struggle with accountability. There is a certain level of what I call the anti-dopamine effect, right? Dopamine is that pleasure when you all of a sudden you do something great and it's fantastic, it's amazing. You get that rush, right? Dopamine, that dopamine rush. Anti-dopamine is basically what I call anti-dopamine is when you feel guilty about your choice. So when you're writing down and you're doing good, and all of a sudden you're like, man, I eat a bag of Skittles. You don't want to write that down, and it makes you feel worse. So it's the anti-dopamine effect. So I can't stress that enough. If you're struggling with accountability, with you making your own choices, you should absolutely 100% start a food journal or start recording all your food. It will literally give you a jump start at kind of working towards your goal no matter what. I don't care if it's gaining muscle, losing fat, leaning out. It doesn't matter what your goal is, health and wellness. It is not you. If you're struggling right now, again, with your own choices, you need to absolutely start a food log. It will change your mentality on how you eat. I promise you that. And the other part of this for the fifth principle, because again, is accountability to your choices, because again, you're the one choosing what you eat, is you need a carrot. Okay, so what do I mean by a carrot? You need something that you are going after. You need something that is that helps you. Motivation is cheap, so you need something that helps discipline you. Basically, if you're just saying I'm just going to change the way I eat with nothing, it's going to be you're setting yourself up to fail. If you have a physique goal, right, you should have a date in line with what, okay, I want to be looking like this, you know, in 6 months, and write the date down, have the picture of what you want and basically make it there. If it's a number, maybe you're like, I weigh 200 pounds and I want to drop to 150. Okay, write that number down, 150 pounds, and write the date that you're going to attain it. As long as you have that, you've created a carrot. If you have a competition, write the competition date down and you're working towards that. If you're not working towards something, you're literally going to be on a boat in the ocean and at sea doing circles. You're not going to be doing anything. You're not going to ever arrive at your destination. Literally, accountability is absolutely, you have to have something you're chasing. So I call it a carrot. You need a carrot. And if you have a carrot in front of you that you're chasing, you will attain the goal. And then once you catch the carrot, you'll end up realizing you're going to form another carrot. But as soon as you lose that carrot, you're lost. And that's a huge part of it. So again, the 5 principles that I have for nutrition is protein, protein, protein. Okay, that's the 1-to-1 is minimum. Reduce, reduction, reduce, whatever you want to use it, eliminate sugar. Okay, start on a 15-day fast of sugar, of added sugar, and that includes I would even in limiting fruit. Anytime you start anything when you're like, I'm going to make a change. Okay, so that's sugar fast. Number 2. Number 3, eat more, not less. Eating, again, 1,000 calories a day is not going to work for anyone. It might work for the first 3-4 weeks, but after that, it's going to go in reverse. Number 4, choose whole foods as much as you can. And I'm not talking about whole foods like the store, but choose real food. You know, and then try to eliminate packaged foods. That is the best thing. If you can even just start there, say, you know what, anything packaged, I'm going to try not to eat. That is a great starting point. And number 5, accountability to your choices. Start your food log. Okay, that basically forces you to tell yourself the truth, because you know that's the only way you're actually going to reach anything. And then again, find your carrot. You got to have a carrot in front of you that you're chasing, right? You got to have that goal. So those are the 5 principles of nutrition. I told you guys I wanted to start with that just because I think those are pivotal for anybody who's trying to make a change. All right, I'm going to get into the questions. Like I said, this whole thing is to stay very informal. So I took some notes on most of these questions. Some of the questions I didn't even take notes. I want to keep it very informal because I don't want to dial into each question to where it becomes beyond specific. If you have a question along the way as I'm answering the questions that everyone submitted, put it in the comment, and I'll try to see if we have enough time. I do plan on doing another one of these, and basically right around Christmas time, since everybody seems to do so well with the holidays, and we think that the holidays are all about sugar. All right. How to eat no carbs was the first question. So again, that question was how to eat no carbs. This is kind of a vague question. I don't think that's the solution for most people. Here's the easiest way to look at this. As if your body fat percentage is higher, okay, you should be on a lower carb diet. If your body fat percentage is lower, you're going to eat more carbs. It's that simple. It doesn't mean you're going to only eat carbs, but you will have higher carbs in your diet than somebody who has higher body fat percentage. So if you know that you're at a high body fat percentage, you're overweight, then yeah, I would definitely reduce carbs. That's where a ketogenic diet would work, something like that. That again, that has principles that could basically work for that. I just wrote an article on functionalmusclefitness.com, and it basically just explains what the ketogenic diet is. So it was the last blog I just posted. So if you're actually looking for more, just look at that. Read that article to get an idea of what I'm talking about. But basically, if you look at a macronutrient balance, it would be about 60% of your diet would be healthy fats, ideally omega-3s, and that would be protein would be about 30% of your diet. You could even go up to around 40% of your diet. And then the last would be about 5 to 10% of your diet would be carbs. So you would have to basically take the time to balance out those macros if you were trying to reduce your carbohydrates. So another aspect that you could end up doing to look at is say, well, how do I replace carbs, right? So if you think of pasta, an obvious alternative would basically be like zucchini noodles. Now, let's be clear, that's not going to taste nearly as good. We can act like zucchini noodles are the best things and they taste fantastic, but I could almost guarantee you 1000% that anytime you put a taste test side by side zucchini noodles versus actual real pasta imported from Italy, you're never going to choose zucchini noodles. I don't care who you are, unless you're not from this world. So with that said, it's not necessarily the best alternative. So maybe reducing or eliminating your carbs is not what you're looking for, but maybe reducing your carbs to 1 time a day is something that you would be a little bit more sustainable. I do not recommend ever going to the extreme. What I mean by that is that basically, if you're like, I'm never going to have a carb, you're probably going to end up falling off that diet and you're going to go back heavily. So what's a good time to eat the carbs might be a better question there. And that would be basically around workout times. Maybe, after you finish your workout, you have a protein shake, and then your next meal, you have carbs. Doesn't mean you have to eat a ton of them, but you could have some. Good carbs I consider would be more like white rice. I'm not going to get into the rice game, but white rice, wild rice would be better. I do not recommend brown rice. If you want to ask me that later. Anyways, so we'll go into that carb. Potatoes, they get a bad rap. I don't think they're that bad for you. Sweet potatoes, obviously, people talk about, they love them, and they're good too. If you have a potato, maybe a potato that's like massive, then yeah. But if you just have a regular size or a smaller potato, that's going to be perfectly fine for you. Then when you get to maybe later on at night, maybe you stay away from it. Maybe you just have protein, vegetables, and some fat. And so that's an easy way for you to think about carbs, is to really just start really shifting it towards, am I working out today and when? That will help reduce, or just think, I want to try to only eat maybe some carbs 1 time a day. If you know you're going to go out and have dinner and you're going to have carbs at night, don't eat carbs throughout the day. So that's the easiest way to eliminate. But if you're really looking for the lowest carb possible, I think it's a good idea for you to study the ketogenic diet a little bit more. But it is something that needs to be consistent, because if you go on it and then you go off of it, you're probably not going to have good effects. So that was the first question, how to eat no carbs. Second, pre and post workout meals. Okay, so this depends on the body and the goal. So this question is more of like I understand what we're saying here, but there's a lot of variables here with the pre and post workout meals. And it specifically goes into the body, the goal, the time of the day you're training. So first, I usually start out by saying, if you're training later, understand that the meal you have 3 hours before your training is probably the food you're burning. So with that being said, if I work out at 5 p.m. at night, whatever I eat at 2 is probably what I'm going to be burning. So you want to actually have something that's a little bit more sustainable. At that point, you're going to think balance, you're going to think protein, you're going to maybe think like some rice or maybe a sweet potato. That would be an opportune time to have carbs. And then that wouldn't really be, so we would not think about that as pre, because you're thinking, oh, that was 3 hours ago, I might eat something before I work out. Well, you're not going to be burning that. So I would typically just stay with something smaller. Maybe it's as simple as 2 hard-boiled eggs. Maybe it is a banana. If you're going to have a hard workout like a leg day, maybe you have a banana before you work out. And maybe you have a protein shake. There's going to be some individuality there. If you work out early in the morning, that's going to change. That's going to be different. So let's say you work out at 6 a.m. You may not even need to eat at that point. If you're going to work out for 90 minutes, then probably you want to eat something in the morning. But if you're only up for 30 to 45 minutes before your workout, I would probably suggest that you basically go fasted, where you don't eat, or you do protein fed, which basically means you have something like a protein shake, or maybe you just do like 2 hard-boiled eggs, which would be obviously it's protein and fat, but you keep it small. So if you're working out early in the morning, I would keep whatever you're going to eat really small. So if that's the first thing in the morning, I don't recommend eating something like oatmeal before you go in and work out if it's early in the morning. Maybe if you're working out maybe around like 10, 11 a.m., and you're waking up at like 6 or 7, then yeah, you're going to have a breakfast. Okay. So in that case, you're going to have, actually one of the best breakfasts for energy is really just to have protein and fat. But you could have something where you have, maybe a little bit of meat, a couple eggs, maybe some raspberries. That would be a sustainable breakfast that would push you off to the workout at that time. If you're working out at lunch, you have your breakfast, and then your snack is going to be the next thing for your workout. So maybe, again, that might just be as simple as a protein shake. Maybe you love yogurt. That could be some Greek yogurt. Maybe it's some cottage cheese. So you really start to kind of fine tune what you love. But I would definitely suggest that it tends on the protein side. Anytime you're snacking, I usually will shift. And again, this could be changed by the individual, but the general rule is going to be more protein and fat with the snacks. Post workout, if your goal is to just get lean and you're working out for an hour 15 minutes, you'll be fine with just something like a protein shake, and that's it. So maybe like I always would go down. My recommendation always is grass-fed whey protein. So maybe you're done, and that would be your shake. You have basically about 30 grams of protein, and you're good. Let's say you worked out for an hour and a half, you killed it. It's leg day, you're dying. You feel like you need a wheelchair to get to the car. Then maybe you want to add something else. So maybe you increase your protein a little bit. Maybe it goes to 40. Maybe you add a little bit of sugar in there. That's okay to do that on those harder training days. Let's say your goal is to build more muscle. Let's say you're trying to gain 5 pounds, 10 pounds of muscle. Then I would recommend that you go to like 40 grams of protein, maybe even up to 45, depending on your age, depending on your weight, all that stuff. So there's variables there, but let's just say generally 40 grams of protein, plus about 20 to 30 grams of added sugar. That added sugar can be a lot of different things. I typically will tell you to be careful of what sugars you're eating. You don't want to do the high fructose stuff. You don't want to do the corn syrup stuff, but maybe a simple sugar is going to be beneficial for you at that point. So maybe just a simple organic cane sugar mixed in some jelly, even right after that workout, if that's your goal for like muscle building, because you do want to have an increased insulin spike. And then that helps shuttle that protein into the muscles for recovery and refuel and growth. So again, to summarize that pre-post workout meals, it's complicated. It can be more complicated. It can be complicated. I'm sorry. And it's going to vary depending on the time of the day. So that's going to be a lot of trial and error. If you have any more specific questions on that, put it in the comments, or when I do this again, I'll try to answer that more in depth. Protein alternatives to red meat and chicken. So basically, you want to be a pescatarian, so you want to just really eat fish. That's kind of the goal at that point. If you don't like red meat and you don't like chicken, I could say turkey, but turkey is basically the same thing as chicken, right? So my recommendation would go to pasture raised eggs. I have a big thing about eggs. Eggs are fantastic for you. They get a bad rap. People talk about them as like bad cholesterol. That's absolutely not true. We can debate that at a later date. Now, if I went to the store and just bought standard eggs, I would argue probably has bad cholesterol. So eggs in general, if you get a healthy, high quality egg, you definitely will get good cholesterol, and it has a lot of essential and neutral or nutritional benefits. If I could talk. So I think that's really a good source. I love my favorite egg is Vital Farms that I find in the market. That's typically the only eggs that I buy. I don't buy Costco eggs. I don't buy any other mainstream eggs. I've tried other eggs. I've bought local eggs, and typically, if you can find a local farm, right, and or have chickens yourself, that's the best egg you're ever going to get. But I found the best alternative, at least in my experience, has been Vital Farms, the pasture raised ones. Those are pretty solid eggs. They always have a really nice, vibrant color for the most part. So that's a big fan. I'm a big fan of those. So eggs, really good. The other one would be fish, obviously, right? If you're not going to eat chicken meat, or really meat, but chicken, turkey, red meat, fish is really good. It can get really expensive, obviously. I don't actually recommend what they would call fresh fish. So fresh fish is frozen when they get it, and then they put it on ice and it thaws out when you get it at the market. So I would just say with anything that's kind of wild caught that you can find already frozen, that would be my suggestion of what you should do to buy fish. Then when you have that fish, just basically take them out, put them in the fridge, let them thaw out for it. Really, they could even take less than 12 hours at times, depending on the size. And then they're ready to cook. You just pull them out, pat them dry of any excess water, and then marinate them however you want. And just keep it simple. But fish is a really solid alternative. Protein powders can be helpful at this point. If you don't want to eat meat, you don't want to eat chicken, all right, red meat, turkey, and you're like, dang, I can't buy this much fish. I don't want to keep eating fish. I'm tired of eggs. It's a good idea to grab maybe a protein shake at that point, because that's a quick, easy way for you to get 30 grams. There's a lot better, more high quality protein that's out on the market these days that you can buy that are like raw. That is just one ingredient, if not just two ingredients. Like they have a stabilizer, and then they have just whey protein or whatever protein powder it is. And I can put some more links in this video too when I post it, so that way you guys can actually just click and go look at which ones I recommend and the protein powders that I use. Vegan protein powder. I think there's another question down here which I'll get into, but a vegan recommendation. It's been popularized to go pea protein, hemp protein, some of these other ones. I definitely never recommend soy. I think it's absolutely garbage and terrible for you no matter what. Be careful with any protein really, but vegan proteins particularly, they have a higher level of metal in them for the most part. So you definitely want to do your research there to figure out if you're going to, before you buy a vegan protein, to see if they list it. A good company that I found with low metal count for vegan protein is Momentous. And they're a pretty solid company when it comes to vegan. So that would be definitely a recommendation if you're going to go that way. And so that would be the vegan alternative. But I can add some links into this when I post it, so that way you can just click and see exactly what protein powders I recommend. AGN Roots is another one that I use for just grass-fed whey. I think it's probably one of the best. It's unflavored, but it mixes with everything: yogurt, shakes, anything. Nutrition. This is a general question. I eat a lot of salads, veggies, fruit, meat, avoid sugar, but I have no idea what else to focus on. Well, that sounds like a lot to focus on. You're eating veggies, okay. If you're eating real fruit, like whole fruit, that's good. Meat, good. Avoid sugar, good. So here's what you want to do is you want to get particular into that. If you eat salads all the time, that is absolutely not necessary. Unless you love salad, like I love how everyone thinks eating a salad is fantastic, right? That's like, oh, I ordered a salad. I'm like, what's on the salad? Steak, French fries, and ranch. Okay, well, just get the burger. Okay, let's be real. That's ridiculous. But I understand if you love salads, you can get a healthy salad. But salad dressing is 99% garbage. The majority of the time, salads are really unhealthy. And I know I'm not going to bash salads too much, but they are typically unhealthy. Why? The dressings are basically packed with sugar. Okay. And then they basically give you soybean oil and any other oil that you can think of that's not actually good for you. If they just gave you olive oil with something simple or maybe like honey as the sweetener, then yeah, it'd be great. So I always recommend making your own salad dressing because it is literally the sneakiest thing in the world is salad dressing. People know Gatorade's bad. They know sports drinks are bad. They know condiments like ketchup are bad, but they think salad dressing is healthy. It's absolutely garbage. There's a few out there, but if you're going to get it, the oil sources you should only be eating would basically be olive oil, avocado oil, or walnut oil. I don't go anywhere past those oils. That's pretty much it. The majority of the time I cook with, well, coconut oil too, but that's got that weird flavor. Um, the avocado oil is mainly what I cook with and what I grill with. I eat olive oil the majority. All my dressings and marinades are all olive oil all the time, and then I use walnut oil as well, interchangeably with avocado oil. I don't cook with a lot of olive oil. I've read and I've studied about olive oil, and I've found numerous people and information that talks about it as basically once you cook it and it's oxidized, it's no longer healthy. And then I've also again seen other people who say no, it is healthy. And olive oil can basically doesn't matter if it's oxidized. It's basically it's extremely good for you. So that could be the case. Again, I just typically go down to the avocado oil. It has the higher smoke points with like walnut oil. And then for like all of my dressings and marinades on meat or salad dressings, I will always go towards olive oil. So when you're looking at that, that's the salad. Went off on a tangent there. Veggies, those are good, obviously. So I think when you're looking at nutrition and you say, I eat a lot of salads, veggies, fruit, meat, I avoid sugar, but I have no idea what else to focus on. I would start by, again, going back to the rules. So you have the 1-to-1 protein ratio. I would argue that you probably are low on protein. So focus there. Actually calculate your sugar count. So literally try to get it down to the gram. And you'll realize you probably still eat a lot of sugar. And then start to incorporate more healthy fat. Just the oils I listed are basically what I have in my pantry. It's basically, and it's always extra virgin olive oil. I try to go unfiltered. It's always got to be cold pressed. It should never be exposed to sun. So there's certain ways that you want to have it, but that's why I will go to the olive oil, avocado, or walnut oil. And that's a good place to focus on. And then again, don't think salads are healthy. So, try to have some form of a more sustainable food. Maybe you want to add in, if that's the case, you might want to add in a little bit more, like one day where you have some rice or a potato or something like that as well. It's a good idea. Next question. I'm transitioning from being an athlete to regular life. Do you have any tips, tricks to downsize portions and still feel full? I also have a job that requires me to work East Coast hours, so my eating schedule is off compared to my household. How can you snack without eating a mini meal? So I'll break this down quickly. Protein, fat, and fiber. Protein, fat, and fiber. Those are sustainable. Carbs and sugar are not. If you eat carbs and sugar, you're going to be hungry a lot because you'll burn them off real quick, and then you will not be as sustained. So I would shift towards the protein, fat, fiber. Do you have any tips to downsize portions and still feel full? I do. I don't ever recommend plastic containers like food containers because plastic like that has phthalates and BPAs and all that stuff. They'll come in and say, well, we don't have BPAs. Well, that's fine. Maybe we've adapted to that, but they still have phthalates. And every time you heat that plastic up, those phthalates get into your body, your stream, your blood, and they're not good for you. Particularly men, they're really bad for your testosterone levels. Again, I've talked about this before, so I'm not going to dive fully into that because that's not what it is today. But I would go with the glass containers instead of your typical plastic. I would grab something that's not overly large, and then what I would start by doing is I would pre-pack, because this is where one of the most important thing with food is how you prep. You absolutely should put your food. Doesn't matter if you're at home, you work at home. It's irrelevant. You make your food, you prep, and then you stick them in containers that aren't overly large. And basically you realize that is your portion. That's it. And that's it. That's your only portion. You can't get bigger. You're not going to go, oh, I'm still hungry and I'm going to get more. Most hunger is actually water hunger. It just means you're not drinking enough water. That's absolutely, like, you can try that on yourself and realize, like, dang, maybe I'm not. And then drink more water and you'll realize you're actually thirsty, not necessarily hungry. But I would definitely start with that, with putting your food, portioning it out ahead of time. If you leave it in a big container and then you're putting it on a plate, you're going to over portion. That's that, and that happens all the time. And then oh, I didn't eat that much, but actually you did. So we want to kind of work that way. So that would be my first suggestion. So protein, fat, fiber. Start prepping your food and putting it in a little bit smaller glass containers. So they're there ready for you to grab. So you don't actually go out and just kind of, you're like, oh, I'm hungry, and then you put more on your plate. And then the last one is, it's off compared to my household. So how can, so your schedule, well, your schedule, to be honest with you, that's just a discipline factor. There's no trick to that. It's just, other than you making a choice. And we talked about it earlier, is putting that carrot out there, right? You have a goal that you're working towards. Just keep that in your right at your workspace. So you have your goal, maybe it's next to your computer. So that way, if you have an idea of like, oh, well, everyone else is going to eat at this time, well, maybe that's not for you. So that one, I would simply just tell you to be more disciplined. How can you snack without eating a mini meal? And it's like 4 questions in one. Well, so a mini meal is basically just means that you have balance within your meal, in your snack. So instead of, you should not just be eating carbs and sugar, you should have protein in everything you eat. You should have protein. So every time you snack should have protein. So maybe for everyone who loves beef jerky, right? But unfortunately, beef jerky has a higher sugar count. So you can find some that are better these days, actually, which it's just going to be a little bit more expensive. So I think when you look at the snack to the mini meal, I think it's a good idea to separate your ingredients out. So it's not mixed together. So maybe you have like a little bit of meat here. Maybe you have, some walnuts over here. And then you can pick at them. So you're still getting that little meal in, but you're actually using it into like a charcuterie board style, where you have them separated out. And so you're just grabbing a little bit. So it treats it like a snack. So you have, let's say you had chicken, but you diced it up into cubes. So now you can pick it off and you can eat it. So it ends up becoming a snack. You'll be shocked on that. Your body or your mind doesn't even recognize that it's not a snack, because again, we're used to meals. So we think mini meal means like we're going to have this, a plate here, a massive plate of pasta or chicken or whatever. But if you just pre-cut and you have them in these containers, you'll realize like you're just using your hands. You can actually, it's a snack now, because snacks we think are our hands. So we have to use them. We don't think utensils. So if you just make it available to your hands, then I guarantee you your mind won't know any different. So a good snack is some cubed chicken in a little bit of a little container. And then you have some like fresh, like some walnuts, some roasted walnuts, maybe some pistachios. For if you're guys, a couple Brazil nuts are good. So things like that would be a good way to snack. Even an avocado cubed up that has like, you could use a toothpick, but it's already pre-cubed. And what you'll realize again is that by you using your hands, you are actually thinking snack. So it's just a way to trick your mind. But as far as your schedule goes, you just need to be a little bit more disciplined. So with this year's cold and flu season approaching, what would you recommend for staying on track with nutrition goals while sick? So that first one, that's a tough one. When you're sick, you don't feel like eating, don't eat. So I would actually recommend fasting for that kind of stuff, which obviously sometimes it's a forced fast because you literally can't eat or you'll throw up. So, but I think the less you eat at that point, when you're really in the heart of the sickness, the better. You're not feeding the virus. And I think that's a really good thing. At that point, though, you want to, obviously, you can drink some herbal teas, things like that are a little bit easier to digest. Having some with ginger is also a good thing, too. That would be another one that, you definitely could be working on. So let me finish this question. People tend to flock to sugary sports drinks and canned soup, which can be a shock if you have been eating whole, nutritious foods. Right. So again, the full question is, with this year's cold and flu season approaching, what would you recommend for staying on track with nutrition goals while sick? And people tend to flock to sugary sports drinks and canned soup. which can be a shock if you've been eating whole nutritious foods. So definitely, like I said, fast if you're in the middle of your sickness. Other than that, stick to whole foods. Do your best to try to stay it that way. Cut up an apple. You know, I found that when you're sick, you can have certain things, but you have to have them in smaller portions. So eating a little bit would be better than eating a lot. We have a hard time with that. We'll end up eating a ton. So organic bone broth, that's another good one. That's a good way, a soup alternative. It's warm. It still has nutritional value, but it's also not going to be as filling as normal soup. I agree though with the canned soup stuff. Kind of, that's always a little suspect. You can find better soups nowadays that are organic, and they're a little bit better for you. But I think soup in general is a ripoff. If you can make it yourself, obviously that's the best. Make it out of bone broth. Keep it real light. You know, maybe you just have a little bit of chicken in there, some carrots. You know, just keep it really, really simple. But bone broth soup, if you can make your own, great. That's a good one. Even just like I said, sipping on bone broth. Organic, low sodium. Even if you go low sodium on the bone broth, it's good. Maybe you go, oh, it doesn't have enough salt. Great. Add your own extra salt. I would recommend to go low sodium, and then you add something like a Himalayan salt, which definitely is needed anyways when you think about when you're sick and you need electrolytes. So that's where Himalayan salt can definitely play a role, and it's very beneficial for you. So go low sodium and then add the extra salt yourself. When you are really sick, so when you're really sick, again, that's what I said, stick to fasting. And then ginger ale, right? We always typically we go to like soda. As best you can, avoid that. That's definitely something that we want to look to not do, but you can maybe find other alternatives. That would be a great like tea, like a ginger tea or something like that. That would be okay. I know you're like, oh, if you don't want to drink it hot, I totally understand that. Brew it, put it in the fridge, and then turn it into like an iced tea. That's a great way to basically get it in without actually kind of upsetting and making you more nauseous. Addicted to sugar, desserts and sweets. This is the next question. Addicted to sugar, desserts and sweets have been a part of my family diet since I was a kid. No meal was complete without dessert. What is the best approach to greatly reducing, eliminating processed sugars from one's diet? Change the sugar you use. The three sugar sources, there's actually a lot of talk about fructose, right? And they think of like agave was promoted because it's low GI, which low glycemic. Agave, I absolutely do not promote. It's too high in fructose, so it's not good for you. The sugar that's actually not as bad would be honey. That's usually my go-to. I think it's absolutely phenomenal. There's coconut sugar is another one that's kind of been started to get a little bit more added. And then maple syrup, real maple syrup, not the like fake I flavored you maple syrup, like actual maple syrup. Those are three alternative sugars that are pretty good. The other thing you could do is you start looking at it is like you want to try to reduce that. So you have to start thinking about sweet alternatives. Here's one thing that we look for as a palate. We'll look for sweet, crunchy. So that's the texture you'll look for. And then usually you'll look for fat, right? So if you can sneak that into your cooking, that's actually a way that can help curb some of that craving. So my recommendation would be first is changing the sugars you eat in general. If you're baking goods, try to use, again, like a ripened banana that's sweet, or maybe adding something that's got a natural sweetness like sweet potato, a yam, to your dinner that can help reduce that curb that craving. Another thing is chewing gum right after. I'm not a big proponent of gum because gum typically is either flavored with a bunch of sugar alcohols, but it does have like a layer of sweetness. So it's one way to help curb behavior. If your addiction level is that high, it's going to be hard for you to just absolutely curb it altogether. So the alternative is to set up a goal that reduces it. So basically say, you know what, I'm going to try to stop eating dessert every single meal during the week, and it's only going to stick to the weekends. That's another alternative. So I think you need to find an actual place and a starting point and start at that position. This would be a perfect way for you to start a food journal. Okay. So you're addicted to sugar and you need to reduce it. So when you write your food journal, I would highly suggest writing it out by hand. But if you have to use your phone, that's fine. But somewhere you should have your goal there. So if your goal is like, I want to be below 50 grams of sugar a day, that goal should be right there in the front. It should say, I am going to eat 50 grams of sugar or less per day. And then as you're writing it, you're seeing it. And so you're realizing, damn, like it's like you're letting yourself down. It goes back to the anti-dopamine effect that I talked about earlier. And that's a really great one. But if you are going to add the sugars, again, maple syrup, honey, and then maybe coconut sugar. But like try to have maybe something a little bit sweeter, like a sweet potato. Even eating a half of a banana, you'll find you'll have satisfaction. And then you won't be, killing yourself with baked goods all the time. Refocusing. This is as hard as this is. That was just a one-liner, literally one. I don't even line, one word. But this is really this is an easy one for me, but not for everyone. So what I would recommend is, and this is the really what it is. We talked about this earlier. If you don't have something you're chasing, I call it the carrot. If you don't have something you're chasing, you don't have that carrot that you're going to attain, you're setting yourself up to fail. Now you may go, well, I don't have anything yet. Okay, well, you need to find one. So if your goal is to get a six-pack, then you say, okay, take a picture of yourself. And this is where progress pictures play a role. But you take a picture of your midsection, and then you say, I am going to have a defined six-pack in 3 months. You write the date down. You have that statement somewhere nearby you, and you kind of repeat it to yourself so it puts you in check. But you have to have something you're attaining. You can't just say, I'm going to go work out. Well, if you're just going to go work out with no goals, then you're just going to kind of mindlessly go through things. You absolutely have to have something you are chasing. Maybe it is, if you're in a competition, it's the competition date. If you don't have a competition date, maybe you are putting down a date to be competition ready. Or like I said, I need to lose 20 pounds. Okay, great. What is the date you're going to lose 20 by? I would definitely say 20 pounds don't be like 3 years from now, but you get the idea. You have to have a carrot there. That's for refocusing. Now, to also refocus, remotivate, progress pictures are king. I'm telling you. You need to be taking progress pictures anytime you're engaged in some form of a nutritional change, or goals for working out. Those are the things you have to actually do for progress pics. My recommendation for progress pictures are 1 month. So every month you take another one. You would take a front view, a side view, and then a back view. And you take it in revealing clothing. It doesn't mean you have to be naked, but you definitely should be in something like a bikini or a swimsuit, or for guys, your boxers, whatever it is. Hopefully you're not wearing tighty whities, because we don't wear those anymore. But you should be definitely in a picture that you can basically be consistent. So I would take it in the first thing in the morning or at the end of the night. I don't like the end of the night because you're technically bloated most of the time. But in general, you should definitely be in more revealing clothing at the same time of the day, and you do it once a month. That should be your progress pic, and that will help you refocus. But again, the number one thing is you got to have a carrot. You got to have something you're chasing. You got to have something you're going after. Otherwise, you are definitely setting yourself up to fail. What are some high protein? This next question. What are some high protein small meal snacks that you would recommend? So snacks is always that tricky term. I mean, again, I'm going to only go back to whole foods. So I definitely recommend, like I talked about 2 questions ago, you cut up chicken, like you cut up other protein source. It doesn't always have to be chicken. Everyone thinks chicken. And chicken breast doesn't even have to be chicken breast all the time either. I think that's the misconception. People think of dried out, nasty chicken breast. You could have some chicken thighs. You can have a whole chicken. You can eat a chicken leg. Like, you can try other forms. It's not a bad thing. We give fat this like nasty viewpoint of like, if I want to lose fat, I got to cut fat. No, that's not true at all. You just need to have healthy fat. So what protein snacks? I don't recommend like bagged chips that are, say, they're protein chips. Those don't really, I don't support that. So you really have to just kind of be creative and think about what kind of protein you like. Not like what I could tolerate. No, what do you like? And then it's about figuring out how to make it down to snack size. So yogurt, Greek yogurt, that's a high protein. That can be a high protein snack. I would definitely recommend getting plain and flavoring it yourself. And then for your sweetener, maybe you add a little bit of honey. But if you just get Greek yogurt that's already pre-flavored, it's just not good for you because you end up having all that sugar. So that's something that you definitely wouldn't do. But the Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, again, I always go with quality. Go with the organic one as much as you can. Grass-fed dairy is also a better source than just getting your standard. That would be another one. There are healthier beef jerkies out there that have less sugar, that are grass-fed beef. So, you could find that direction. A protein shake, that's also a good one. You just have to have it prepped. And and you got to find something like, again, I'm going to point grass-fed, but you got to find something you like. If you just are eating, I got to go this again, it's really going to be a challenge for you to be sustainable, even in choosing any of the protein small meals. So that's definitely part of it. Sorry. All right. Let's see, the next question, as women age and go through menopause, hormone changes, etc., and the season of life, I definitely relate to this question. How do your nutritional needs vary? More or less protein, carbs, etc., eat less, more? Okay. Simply stated on this one, as women age and go through menopause, and immediately you list hormones, right? Healthy fats, quality protein. That will help you out tremendously, and be consistent. You definitely don't want to go through the ups and downs. Starve yourself. You're eating a lot. Starve yourself. No, try to be as consistent as possible. Be a little bit more simple, but stick to high quality protein and high quality fat. I will always shift you towards omega-3s. That is absolutely vital. So when you think omega-3s, it's walnuts, flaxseed, sometimes like a lot of fish. You can go into pasture, grass-fed beef, pasture-raised eggs, all that kind of stuff is a high quality fat. So you want to go that direction. You definitely want to be abundant in it. Avocado, you could have avocado, that's a good fat. Coconut oil, so start each morning with some MCT oil, some really good MCT oil. That's a good fat. Grass-fed butter, that's a good fat. Doesn't mean you overeat it. Doesn't mean you're just eating fat all day. But by having fat, it's actually really, really essential, and it helps with the hormonal balance. But it's got to be high quality. Protein, again, and reducing carbs and sugar. I know it's a standard theme, but it plays a role with the hormones. So for menopause, that would be an absolute, really think more protein and more fat, healthy fats. And especially training. Training is great. It's definitely, it becomes a little bit harder. It definitely becomes a little bit harder. But yeah, I think butter, one healthy fat that's had a bad rap, and it was literally pushed by doctors, and this is not an exaggeration. They switched everything to I can't believe it's not butter. That's absolutely garbage. Okay. You want to avoid these vegetable oils, like soybean oil, canola oil, all that other stuff. You want to avoid it. You want to stick to the oils that I listed, which were the omega-3s, or avocado, walnut, ground flax oil is fine, but you don't really cook with that. And extra virgin olive oil. Grass-fed butter. Okay. Grass-fed butter is good for you. It is not a bad fat. People think it's the worst fat. It is not bad. You go, I can't eat butter. Absolutely. Avoid oil, and you should eat the butter. Okay. I know that sounds weird, but I'm telling you, grass-fed, organic grass-fed butter is really a solid fat for you to eat. Doesn't mean you should eat a half a stick. Okay. But if you're ever going to have butter, that is the butter to choose from. Okay. Organic grass-fed. Eating more varieties of protein is the next question. I definitely, again, you find proteins that work for you. I know some people who stick with literally the same protein every day, and that's totally fine. If it works for you, that's totally fine. This is where tracking your progress pictures, food journals, all that stuff works. So make sure you guys are actually doing that. But varieties of proteins, try them out, figure out which ones you like. I could go for length at this, because there's so many different ways that you can have protein. You could look at red meat and think about all the different cuts that you could have. You could have chicken, think about all the ways you could cook it. Think about all the different cuts you could have, right? So you start to find things that work for you. But my suggestion there is find things that you can get. So like sometimes you'll find the most amazing thing, right? But you can't ever get it again. Well, that doesn't help you. So you want to find those sustainable sources for you, your lifestyle, your budget, all right, and then what your goals are. And then you want to be able to be consistent with it. So you want to be able to stay with it. So for me, I order a full cow at a time. I go to a smaller farm up in Sonora, and I pay for it in bulk. That works for me. So I always have grass-fed meat on hand. That works for me. That might not work for you. So you have to figure out again what works for you, but what works for your budget, right? What works for your lifestyle. Those are big things that definitely need to be worked on. And so that's a really helpful way to figure out where you're going to be doing for a variety of protein. Meal planning for fat loss, muscle gain. I've covered this. Meal planning for fat loss, muscle gain. Fat loss, muscle gain means protein, fat. You need to have it. You need to have adequate amount of calories. For this specifically, I would tell you, you need to go to like a 1.2 to 1. So, and that's for grams per protein. So, you know, again, it's 1.2 grams per pound of body weight of protein. And that would be my recommendation. Meal planning, prep your food. And every time you have a breakfast, lunch, dinner, have it a balance. For breakfast, lunch, dinner, it should be a balanced macronutrient plate. Protein is constant always. You could have a little bit more carbohydrates for fat loss, muscle gain on the first full meal after your workout. You should have a simple sugar after you have worked out heavily. You want to have 40 grams of protein about, and then you want to have a little bit of sugar, so at least 20 to 30 grams of simple sugar after your workout. And again, this is for fat loss and muscle gain. And then work out with volume. That's another big one. But since it's meal planning, you definitely, again, you just pack it out. So you'll have a little bit more in the sustainable 3 meals. And then your snacks, you need to make sure you're snacking. I would definitely recommend, you know, having a little bit higher of those mini meals where you have more protein and fat. How do you deal, where am I at? How do you deal with weekend ending, especially when you feel like you've earned a bit of a cheat meal? So this one I'm going to keep really short. It's very simple, 9 for 10. So if you look back in your life and in your meals, if you ate 9 solid meals, you deserve a 10th one that you enjoy. So if you do 9 for 10 eating, that basically means that 90% of the time you're perfect, and 10% you can actually have something that maybe is not so perfect. And what ends up happening over time is you will eventually find out that 10% you don't even want, and it will end up being 5% because you'll start to enjoy and feel better with eating good. So for right now, write your food log or keep track of your food, count it out. When you hit 9, then that gives you 1. That means you could push that 1 to the weekend. And that would be, again, the 9 for 10, 9 out of 10 principle. Food prep, portion sizing, and recommendation for those living with people who may not be on the same diet as yourself. Start buying food and bringing it into the house, and don't buy other food. You know, if you are living with people who don't eat as healthy, then you need to take over who buys the food. And that will basically solve a ton of the problems. And then keep your carrot in view, right? So you don't make those unhealthy choices. And then the last part of that would be try not to eat out. Because that's the other side, like food prep and portion sizing. So food prep has to happen. I recommend food prep on Sundays and then one other time during the week. Always portion sizing. That means you keep them in specific containers with different portion size. So I have glass Tupperware, and I will have my meals prepped in the certain ones, and I have snacks prepped in others. So that's a really helpful thing. But if you don't meal prep, you're not going to be that successful. And then, like I said, for living with other people who aren't on that same diet, take over the shopping list. Does variation in meals matter over time, or if something seems to be working? Does it affect metabolism to stick with it? No, you don't have to vary too much. I would say you don't want to eat the same thing every day in terms of like, I'm only going to eat chicken. That's it, right? No, you want to vary it. But if you're like, you know, this is what works for me at lunch, don't stress too hard about whether or not that's a bad thing, because it's not. As long as you have other variables, other places, but like if you only eat, let's just say you're like, I only eat a potato, a piece of chicken, and broccoli, and that's all I eat every day at every meal, then yeah, that might be a problem. But if you're pretty much consistent and there's variation within your day, but each day is basically the same, so you pretty much say, I eat almost identical Monday through Friday, and there's some variation, don't stress about it. You'll be perfectly fine. There's not going to have any issues with metabolism. The things that will happen with metabolism is if you reduce your calories significantly or you're over exercising or things like that. Yeah, you can over exercise. It is possible, especially when you're not eating. Then those are things that can affect metabolism. But it's not if you're eating like the same lunch for the 5 days during the week. Vegan versus whey protein, in your opinion? Well, you gave me my opinion. Whey protein's 10 times better. Best way for a non-meat eating person to get protein. So fish is good. Fish would be basically, if you're not eating meat, I would definitely go with fish. Have that at least with lunch and dinner. Go down to eggs for breakfast. Don't be afraid to eat eggs. Maybe you're having 2 eggs and 2 whole eggs and then 2 egg whites. That's another good thing for you to be able to do. But I definitely recommend whey. I would go with grass-fed organic whey. Most people who say they're whey intolerant and they don't, or it doesn't taste good, it's because they're eating protein with tons of artificial sugar, alcohols, and sweeteners. You want to choose some that are either unflavored or maybe they have flavor, but they don't have all of those fake sugars in them. And you'll realize that you're probably not affected as much by the protein as you are the extra added sugars that are in there. That's where most people actually have reactions from. So that would be another component that I think you should work on. But I would in my opinion, I'm going to recommend grass-fed whey over vegan every day. It's also anabolic because it comes from animal protein, where vegan's not. So how to determine macros? So this is a trial and error. I would definitely recommend think about macronutrients as this. Protein, there's 3 things there's a few things you can think of to simplify. But again, it's going to come down to trial and error. So you're going to need to take progress pics. You're going to need to have a food journal. But protein's constant. You have carbs over here. You have fat over here. The higher the fats are, the lower the carbs are, right? And the protein stays constant. The higher the carbs are, right, the lower the fat is, protein stays constant. Typically speaking, if you're trying to figure out the macros, if you're not at an extremely lean state, tip the fat up a little bit higher, protein's constant, carbs are going to go lower. From there, start with the 1-to-1 ratio of protein. And then if you're 150, again, the calories are going to be a little bit unique. But I would maybe go with like you could start with maybe like a 60, again, a 60-40-10. A 60-35-5 or a 60-30-10. For 60 would be the fat, protein, and carbs. Or you could even go like a 40, you can mix it up, but you could even go 50% of it's fat, 40% of it is protein, and then 10 carbs. You're just going to have to kind of figure that out. But an easy way to do that, again, is you have to, no, not easy, but you have to take progress pics. You have to make sure you're recording in your food log, and then 1-for-1 on the protein. That will be the most efficient way to determine where your macronutrient balance is on your own. Where do you recommend I search for helpful recipes? You just kind of have to browse. I think Instagram has been pretty solid on that. Pinterest is another one. I mean, social media platforms have been pretty helpful for most people. Find somebody that you like, and then you typically just kind of follow them and try out recipes as you go. The way that you make healthier recipes, and I'm putting more recipes out as I create them. And we have a ton. I'm going to end up publishing a functional diet book coming out. I'm hoping by next year, and that will have a lot of recipes in it as well. But until then, stick to the things we've just discussed. Use your oil. So think about the quality of the ingredients you're cooking with. That is going to be the most important thing when it comes to health. So you serving, like, let's say we make tacos and you use just normal beef versus grass-fed beef. Well, the grass-fed beef is going to determine it to be way healthier than the normal beef. Let's say you use avocado oil versus canola oil. Well, the avocado oil is going to make it 10 times healthier. So I think when you start thinking of the recipes, you need to first start by breaking down the ingredients you're using. And that's where a lot of the trick is in cooking. If you can start using those high quality ingredients, your body processes it more. If you look at pictures of people back in the 50s, they ate butter, they ate all sorts of stuff. And they were way smaller than people are today. Now you walk around and you go to Costco and you can see morbid obesity everywhere. Well, is it that we're eating more, or is it that our quality of food has basically gotten way worse? And there's obviously a combination there with society, but again, go to the sources of the food you're eating, the oils you cook with, the kind of meat, where did the meat come from? How did the meat live? The vegetables you're getting, how long has those veggies been on the shelf? Those are the things that you should focus on. But in terms of finding specific recipes, Twitter, Pinterest, those are pretty good. So making the commitment. So the commitment goes back to the carrot. We kind of talked about this earlier on, the refocusing. Find your carrot, set something there in place, set a goal, pick a date, pick something you're looking to do, whether it's a progress pick, whether it's a certain lift that you want to be. I want to squat 500 pounds. I want to lose 20 pounds. I want to be show ready at this point. Whatever that goal is, you need to have something there so you're not mindlessly just going through the motions. Without a goal, without an aim, you're setting yourself up for failure. So the commitment is going to be that first. Second part of that commitment is setting up your morning routine. I don't care if you work out at night, you need to have a consistent morning routine. That morning routine will allow you to continue to stay committed and disciplined for what you're trying to go for. And that other side of the commitment is write it down. Write down what you're going for and have it somewhere that's in your view so you see it often. That will allow you to stay committed, but you got to have that carrot. Last thing is dialing in macros and timing of meals. I just talked about how to determine the macros, so it's basically the same thing. I had a few chats. This is the last part. I had a few chats. One of them, it was butter choices, and I already said that organic grass-fed butter is all I choose. That is my number one. I go to Whole Foods and I kind of a butter connoisseur. I check constantly about it. So like when I grill a grass-fed steak, when I'm done with the steak, I have butter on a knife and I rub it across as it's hot and it melts into it. So I add a little extra fat. It's a good hormone booster. But it's organic grass-fed. And then the other one is an alcohol choice. Well, to be honest, no alcohol is really good. But I do think in moderation, it is helpful. It can be okay. If you're at a social event and you want a glass of wine, go for it. That goes back to the 9 for 10, right? 9 for 10. So if you're great 9 out of the 10 times, you're probably going to be okay with that glass of wine. Now, if you're drinking wine every night, that's a lot of sugar. So you're adding a ton of sugar into your diet. So maybe you need to go fully no sugar for that whole day. But alcohol is a tough one. It's not necessarily, there's no real right answer there. Obviously, if you're a beer drinker, good luck. You're going to have a big gut. Appreciate everybody watching. Like I said, I wanted to keep this informal. I really appreciate everyone tuning in. I will be posting this as well. But again, if you're looking for anything more diet related, you can email me, fmfmark@gmail.com. Most of you have my email already based on who registered. Some of you do not. But again, it's FMF, Frank Mary Frank, MARK@gmail.com. You can check out functionalmusclefitness.com for different information on nutrition. And then lastly, nomoresoftness.com, my personal blog page. A lot of information there. We're actually going to be putting this on YouTube there. And we're doing a lot more when it comes to content education that's going to be pushed through that as well. So check that out and you'll see you'll definitely see a lot of recipes that I'm going to be posting on nomoresoftness.com. And we will be, again, hopefully by 2023, I have the functional diet book out, which is going to break down a lot of different things, concepts, and what have you. So appreciate everyone. Thank you very much.